We are glad you are with us again, and we have a great episode in store for you with a best-selling author. This edition of What's Next, Living Longer, Better, Smarter is made possible by Vivid-Pix.
So I've been in the photo business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of things come go. But one thing has not changed, and that this wonderful thing we call a photograph captures a moment in time so that we're able to reminisce and relive those memories tomorrow. And it's important for us to do that so we can share them with loved ones and we can share them with future generations. So please don't let your memories fade. They're important.
I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Fred. I love books and I love amazing authors, so I'm so excited about this session today.
Well, The Mystery of Mastery is the title for this episode. We kind of stole it. And joining us is the author of a new book titled The Real Work on the Mystery of Mastery, Adam Gopnik. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Fred. Hey, Mary. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's wonderful to meet you, Adam, and congratulations on your new book. It's a topic I think a lot about.
Well, this is a book that's about, in the simplest level, it's about my falling into the study of a series of improbable accomplishments. That is to say, improbable because I had never accomplished them before, and also because I would seem extremely ill-suited to accomplishing some of them. I took up in late middle age, let's call it politely, I took up drawing, real life drawing, representational drawing, classical drawing, driving, studying magic. I never got to perform as a magician, obviously, but I studied it closely. Driving, which I know shocks people because I was in my 50s before I could learn to drive, before I got my license, which is partly a function of living in New York and partly a function of the oddities of my own family. Then dancing and boxing and baking and a few others along the way. Music, above all, which is my real passion. And I devote a chapter to my first attempt at writing musical theater. So all of these things happened, I should add, not according to plan. In other words, I didn't say my next book will be a study of learning how to do things that you can't do. One fell after another. My son Luke, when he was 13, became obsessed with card magic. That drew me to Las Vegas and the fascinating company of magicians. Then I had to learn to drive a car so I could relieve my hard driving wife on summer vacations. So I did that. I very much wanted to learn to draw, again, not for the purposes of a book, but because I'd spent 40 years as an art critic who didn't know how to draw, and finding out how to do the thing that you think you can criticize seemed to me significant. And so on. So it wasn't a premeditated series, but it's a post-meditated series, a very strenuously post-meditated series where I try and extract and distill out commonalities, universalities even, of all those practices. What is the real work? The real work is a term magicians use to talk about someone who has real mastery of a trick or an illusion. And they don't mean who invented it, and they don't even mean who does it with the greatest virtuosity, who's got the fastest flying fingers on the Erdnase card change. They mean who does it with impeccable technical virtuosity, but also does it with amazing anticipatory empathy for what the audience is thinking. Who's the one who's always a step ahead of the audience? Because that's the magician's game. Because once you've seen a trick, you're habituated to it. And you kind of, even if you don't know how it's done, you know what it's going to do. The magician has to stay a step ahead of that. You do magic with your mind, not your fingers. So the question of who's got the fastest fingers and the quickest mind, that's the real work. And it's a term, I think, that's applicable to almost all the arts and crafts and hobbies that we undertake.
Well, Adam, you're so well known from your other books, okay, and such as Paris to the Moon, and your work at the New Yorker. I mean, all of these things that you're talking about, it strikes me that you've written about many of them over the years, art and sports, food, and politics too. You didn't run for office for this book, I know.
No, I have what, depending on your point of view, an impatient and short-winded mind, or a horizontal and broadly elusive mind. You can take your pick of those two descriptions. But it's certainly true. I'm curious, as vocationally curious. I enjoy the company of many different kinds of people and many different kinds of books, and above all, of many kinds of teachers. I love teachers. The book is dedicated to anyone who will learn and anyone who can teach, and particularly to my greatest teacher I ever knew, the late Kirk Varnado, great art historian, who was also a great football coach. I asked him once, parenthetically, what made you choose art history over football? The greatest teacher I ever knew was Kirk Varnado, who became a legendary art historian, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, but also had pursued a career as a football coach. He had worked with Bill Walsh at Stanford. And I asked him once, what made you decide to become an art historian rather than a football coach? And he said, the thing about coaching football is you have to be smart enough to do it well and dumb enough to think it matters. And so that was, I thought, a distinction that has remained with me through my life. So really, in a certain sense, this book is about falling in love with teachers. Jacob Collins was my drawing teacher, and he was a fantastic teacher exactly because he refused to indulge my taste for the imperfections, the deliberate imperfections of modern art. That's one of the things that makes Matisse or Picasso great, is that they wanted to draw like children. They said it flat out, right? We're fed up with excessive sophistication. We want to draw like children. That I think is an admirable, fascinating adventure. For Jacob Collins, it's absolutely damnable. He thinks modern art, he thinks all art took a wrong turn around 1855, and he wants to get us back to the circumstances of a Paris atelier in 1854, when it's filled with plaster casts of classical statues and real live nude models, so you have to draw accurately, meticulously, optically.
And you did that.
And I did it, and I spent 2 years learning to do it. I didn't do it well. Jacob, you should look him up online. Jacob Collins is an astounding virtuosic draftsman and neoclassical artist, and a very good friend. We don't agree about art, but we share a mutual love for dedication to drawing. And then Jamie in Swiss was my guide through the world of magic. Jamie is a fantastic, legendary sleight of hand man, and the most irascible teacher you will ever meet, beautifully irascible. It occurred to me when I was out on the road with this book, it's not in the book, that there's a reason why the Greek myths all have as the greatest teachers in the cosmos are the centaurs, the wild men, half man, half savage, half animal, because exactly what we seek out in a great teacher, male or female centaurs too. What we seek out is someone who's not too easily tameable, not someone who's easily pleased. We want someone who creates a very high standard, but who also offers you enormous patience in your pursuit of that standard. Kirk Varnado, as I say, was my greatest teacher, did that. He was tireless and tirelessly demanding, but he was infinitely patient, whether you were an art history student or a young football player, if you made a commitment to getting better. You didn't make a commitment to getting better, he had no time for you. But if you made that commitment, he had infinite patience to work with you.
Which skill did you enjoy the most?
Oh, that's easy, actually. I mean, learning to drive was the greatest validation, because I never thought I could learn to drive. And when the driving judge, the state inspector, handed me the thing that said you can go get your driver's license, I truly, getting married, having kids, nothing. My heart just leapt in my chest. My wonderful driving teacher, Arturo Leon, another great teacher I worked with, and I hugged each other as though we had just won the World Series, like those great photos of the catcher and pitcher hugging. My son, Luca, got his license that same day from the same driving judge. So that was the biggest personal vindication. The thing I enjoyed most and go on enjoying is boxing. Boxing has just been a transcendent thing in my life, both because it's a way of unleashing one's own natural belligerence and so on, but you unleash it without unleashing it. You discipline it. You draw borders around it. When you learn in boxing is not to, get violent. My teacher, without knowing how funny this was saying to me, another brilliant guy, Joey Contrada. And Joey said to me the other day that they'd had a bad Saturday in the gym. I said, why? He said, I was doing my boxing classes and a fight broke out. And he wasn't even aware. But he meant it, right? The worst thing that can happen in a boxing class is for a fight to break out. That in the middle of this world of super discipline, regimented, ballet-like instruction, somebody simply, acts with violence and hyperaggression. That's the worst thing that can happen in a.
So interesting, because I mean, you said you studied dance with this too, and then you just mentioned ballet. So there is a relationship, isn't there?
I deliberately made the last chapter of the book about both boxing and dancing and intertwine them because they're so similar. Because in boxing, what you learned is this tightly choreographed set of gestures. You go jab, jab, cross, hook, slip, uppercut, and you have to learn that set. I just was doing a boxing lesson moments ago, an hour ago, and all we were working on is slipping your left shoulder back when you throw the cross, and again and again and again and again. All we were talking about is how do you spin back your left shoulder, shift it back so you can throw the cross not from your shoulder, not from your right shoulder, but with your entire body. It's the most disciplined form of dancing in a way that you can do. And dancing, of course, similarly, is about learning all of these small counterintuitive stumbling little steps that you have to do, which again, if you persevere in it with some passion, you suddenly one evening when you're dancing with your daughter on the Esplanade of Central Park, you're no longer just stumbling your way through the steps. You're actually doing an approximation of the foxtrot. There's a good lyric for you, approximate the foxtrot. And that's what it's all about. And so boxing for me has been something I can never imagine giving up. I had to give it up actually last summer because, as happens to those of us who are entering early middle age, I got a torn retina and I had to go in for surgery and I had to stop. And oh, how I hated being out of the boxing gym. But I got the okay 4 or 5 months ago to go back, and it's the greatest high I know.
You tell the doctor I could have been a contender.
Absolutely. I am a contender in my own headspace.
So this is a perfect topic for us, and one I care so passionately about, because there's no guidance counselor as you enter your third age years. And Third Age was one of my companies. That's actually where I met Fred. And I love the book, George Leonard's book on mastery. But what I find, like tomorrow I'm going to graduation this weekend, and as an alumni, but when you are trying to design your own third age, you're trying to think about what do I want to learn? So for me, because I have back issues, water aerobics is really important to me. And I totally agree what you're saying about the quality of the teaching. So whatever, you inspire us to think about the multiplicity of things that one can take on. And in the book, you tell us about your adventures in doing all of these new things, like cooking and dancing and painting. And I think back to the word amateur, which is when you're older, you free yourself from needing a grade or a degree, and you're in it for the passion and to get it right. So having a great teacher, no matter what domain you're looking at, like I took up online bridge during the pandemic, and it was really fun to be with these masters, right?
Absolutely. Funny you mentioned bridge, because we played a lot of bridge during the pandemic too. Not very ably, but we did it with our 2 kids, and we had a fantastic time. You understand why bridge is, our son is a good chess player, and he was good at bridge because they're not dissimilar. It's a funny thing, Fred, Mary, that when I started this book, the last thing in the world, to be honest, I was thinking of is giving sage advice to seniors. Though I'm a senior myself in need of sage advice, I was doing what essayists do. I was exploring experience, and I didn't have a particular motive, a particular agenda at all. But one of the things that's been so pleasing to me about the experience of publishing a book and the experience of writing a book and the experience of making a book public are very different experiences. And one of the things that's been so pleasing about making this book public is exactly the number of whatever we call it, third stage folks who have come up to me and have genuinely said, I feel inspired because I feel I've been caught in stasis for a while. And I'm encouraged to think that if you can go box, I can go box. And that's true. And the thing that I can't emphasize enough from that point of view is that your interior exaltation at accomplishment is every bit as great and keen at 60, learning to do something not particularly well, but getting better at it. If you don't get better at it, if you don't persevere in it, if you don't have a passion for it, it's just going to be either frustrating or a kind of desultory hobby that you try now and again. But the glorious thing about being a human being is that we are hungry for the flow. We're hungry for those moments of improvement when all those stumbling little steps, whether you're knitting or doing macrame or yoga, whatever it might be, when all those stumbling little steps suddenly come together in an unexpected way, and you have the epiphany of the flow of absorption, pure happiness. And that, as I've said often on the road, I wish I'd thought to put it in the book, it occurred to me later, is what we might call a cognitive opiate. It's like a drug that your brain produces. And that is available to you and will get you high in the most positive sense at any age with any activity, provided you supply the fuel of that passionate perseverance in it. And I can guarantee anyone that they will have that experience. It's been super heartening to me. And every older person who's taking up a hobby in later life, is doing macrame or taking singing lessons or learning bridge, has got rocket fuel in their hands from a cognitive point of view. They're going to have as big a high as an 18-year-old winning an Olympic medal.
Remember, Get Set Up, we had a lot of people that have become teachers with inside that platform. And in the pandemic, a lot of people needed to skill up because the service jobs went away. So learning and continuing these technology skills. And I love your story about driving. I have to take my driver's test. And now that's another fear, right, we have as we get older. And
you had an interesting quote in the book, Mary, about the learning to be selectively blind, learning not to see too much when you're learning to drive.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that makes driving a little bit different than some of the other things that I studied and it was inquired into, and that is that driving, as I say in the book, isn't really difficult as such. It's just incredibly dangerous. That's the difficulty with learning to drive, is learning to put the danger aside enough, detach yourself from it so you can pursue the activity. And it's been so funny, Mary, because I can't tell you the number of people, women, I will say particularly, who have said to me, I stopped driving for a couple of years during the pandemic. And when I got back in a car, I suddenly realized how dangerous this thing that I'd been doing since the age of 16 really was. And that's exactly, Fred, what I mean by saying there's some things, activities in life where it's your blindness that will help you rather than the acuity of your perception. In a sense, now that I think about it, it's true about pretty much everything. One of the things that you want to do, you think that wouldn't be true about drawing. But when you're learning to draw a naked body, you're learning to look past a lot. You're learning to focus on a few strange shapes, on a little passage of light and shadow that you can describe as though it were the outline of an African nation. In a certain sense, the less you see in drawing, the more you see. And certainly the less you fear in driving, the better you drive. So selective and deliberate blindness has its place and its uses.
And I suppose you could tell your wife that you were being selectively blind. So
yes, exactly. There's a limit to it, I dare say. And it is my dad, who's 88, has to take, who's been driving since he was 14. So how many years does that give us I'm almost 75 behind the wheel, has to take his driver's test again. He's deeply offended by it, but is going to do it.
I was shopping for a car and I was at a dinner party. And the question came up was, could I learn how to drive a Tesla? And, one of the things we talked about is what could you see? But I think fear of loss of their car, fear of loss of the ability to drive is a big problem for people, especially here in California, And
in New York City, it's a paradox, right? New York City, which you think would be the worst place for older people, is actually a very good place because it's one of the very few places where you don't depend on a car for your existence.
So, Adam, if I'm looking a little bleary-eyed, it's because I stayed up late with some headphones on because of this new audio book that came out that you did with Steve Martin.
Yeah,
it's just wonderful, just out. So many Steves, Afternoons with Steve Martin. Tell us about this and your friendship. He is like you, I suppose, a man of many skills.
Yes, and that's one of the things I think we have in common. Steve and I have been friends. I can actually date it since October 9th, 1990, because we met on the opening night at the party for an exhibition that Kirk Varnado I've been talking about with such affection. Kirk was the chief curator of the Museum of Modern Art, and I did called High and Low Modern Art and Popular Culture at the Museum of Modern Art. I was a pipsqueak young art critic and historian. Kirk was newly installed chief of MoMA, and it was an extremely controversial, though in retrospect, trailblazing and pioneering show. And Steve Martin, who was at the height of his fame, was there at the opening because he loves art, which I had sort of vaguely knew. But what I didn't know is, very often when a celebrity loves art, it means they have some, dealer who's helped them choose 16 blue chip pictures at $1 million a pop. Steve genuinely loves art and has a discerning eye. And we started discussing the show, and he had some wonderfully smart and acute criticisms and additions to make to the show. And we just launched into a conversation, and somebody had to kind of pull us apart because we both had other places to go. And we've been talking in that same way about art and about life. When we lived in Paris, I was writing the work that led to Paris the Moon. Steve would come and visit often. He enjoyed being in Paris, where he was less likely to be recognized and harassed, though sometimes he was. And we've just been great friends who love talking about books and life and pictures and magic and philosophy. And finally, we decided, with the encouragement of Pushkin audiobooks, that we would submit those conversations to a microphone. And I would bike over to Steve's apartment. I live on the east side of Manhattan, Steve on the west side. In the pandemic, just in the latter stages, but still in the pandemic. And I would go over there and we would just talk. And we decided we would talk about everything. In other words, we didn't have any structure going in, and that's what we did. And then a structure emerged afterwards. It was inspired by a wonderful poem by E. Cummings. Another thing Steve and I both love is poetry and quoting it at each other, since our wives have limited patience for hearing poetry quoted at them. And this beautiful poem by Cummings, in which he references that each of us has so many selves, so many selves. When I heard that, I thought, wow, that's the title of our book. And we allowed it to become So Many Steves, so the subject would be a little bit more obvious and less avant-garde in a way. But Steve is a fascinating man exactly because he exemplifies all of the values that the real work is about. And curiously, there's a kind of transitive relationship, which I didn't foresee, between the two projects. I was writing the real work while Steve and I were doing our audiobook, because Steve is one of those people who gets totally absorbed in an accomplishment. When he was 14 and 15, he wanted to learn the banjo because he was in love with folk music. This is the height of the Kingston Trio, remember that, and so on. And what he did was to have a portable record player that he turned down. No one beyond a certain age will remember this, but you could put it on 16 revolutions per minute. Your records in those days, 40, you had a choice, 45, 30, 16, put it on 16, so it'd be really slow. And he would listen to Earl Scruggs recordings in his parents' car with all the windows, with all the doors shut and the windows shut down so nobody would be bothered by it. And he would slowly, hour after hour, learn these Earl Scruggs banjo pieces. It's exactly the kind of breaking it down into the small parts and then building it back up that I write about. So he had a whole life as a musician, which he's kept up to this day. He wrote the music for a lovely Broadway show called Bright Star. He wrote all the music for it. He also is a novelist. He's also obviously a great comedian. And so we talked about all of those things. But exactly, Fred, the nature and profile of Steve's accomplishments mirrors and even mimics the values and the practices that I'm celebrating in the real work.
And he still can be that wild and crazy guy. There's lots of humor in here too.
He's always that way. Steve is just naturally, it's one of the questions people always ask me, Fred, about the real work is, well, do you not believe in individual talent? Do you share with your friend Malcolm Gladwell this thing about 10,000 hours, which, to be fair to Malcolm, he never quite mechanized as much as people did. That's always the way with a strong idea. Somebody has a strong idea, and then it becomes kind of mechanistic in popular repetition as it echoes. through. And the answer is, of course, there are natural gifts. You can't be with Steve Martin and not laugh. He is naturally funny. He finds the absurd side of everything, but he's also deeply serious. And that natural gift, which is real, would never have matured into this extraordinary contribution to the world's reservoir of comedy had he not had an incredibly disciplined mind and disciplined practice. As I'm sure you heard in the audiobook, Fred, it was no accident what Steve was doing. Steve had a kind of manifesto as a young man for where he thought comedy should go. He wanted to drain the politics out of it because he thought that had become excessive and corny. He thought there was room for a kind of absurdism, that you could make comedy out of meta jokes, like wearing if you remember, the arrow through the head, right? Obviously, that's not funny, right? In our sense, it's very crude. It's the crudest form of humor. But if you have a character, the character Steve invented, who doesn't know how dumb that is, it becomes very funny. His innocence about its stupidity becomes the funny part. So Steve is a genuine intellectual of comedy who also has a huge natural comic gift. The two things, to make a broader point, the two things are never at war. They're always complementary. Having a natural gift means most often wanting to pursue and practice over and over the thing you're good at.
Well, my mentor was Lloyd Morissette, and he created Sesame Street with Joan Cooney and then funded Senior Net later. But when he retired, he took up piano. I think he may have played it his whole life, but he dedicated that time. And I think you do reach this point of joy that you've inspired us to all go out and start. And so before we let you go, what are one or two things that you still haven't done that you'd like to try? And also, can you tell us the comment you made earlier about humanities, like bringing back the humanities?
Absolutely.
My former professor is going to be so happy to hear that.
So let me answer the first question first, and then the second question, which is in some ways a deeper question, next. I have very specific ongoing ambitions, which I hadn't gotten to the point of mastery sufficient to write an essay, the fully developed essay about them. I want to learn very much to sing. I love music, play some guitar and jazz guitar, and actually got to perform during the pandemic on rhythm guitar, kind of in Freddie Green style, if that means anything to you. Count Basie's great guitar player, at the French Institute, one of the proudest boasts of my life. I have a picture of myself playing it, which sits here on my desk. And I would love to learn to sing, because I write songs. I write the lyrics for songs, a lot of them now. I've published more than 60, but I don't have the ability to present them because I don't sing well enough. And singing, as any good singer will tell you, is just talking in pitch. It's just like anybody can sing, not necessarily brilliantly, but anyone can sing, but you have to relax to do it. So I want to learn to sing. I want to learn Italian. I love Italy, and it's a source of endless frustration to me. I speak French, obviously. We lived in France for a long time. That when I go to Italy, I end up speaking French with a pseudo-Italian accent. And my kids still find it's their favorite joke, is because I once tried to order wild strawberries, fragolini, in an Italian restaurant. And I said fagiolini by mistake, which are green beans. And I got green beans for dessert. So singing and Italian are both things that are dear to my heart. And I wish I had gotten accomplished enough to put into the book, but maybe in a volume 2, the realer work, I'll include them. The humanities. So one of the goals of this book, and not explicitly, but sort of surreptitiously, at one point I had as an explicit goal in the introduction, and it seemed a little too belligerent, is to vindicate or make the case for the humanities against the social sciences. In other words, you can find lots of social science, and a lot of it, quite frankly, kind of pseudo-social science that pretends to give you expert advice or recipes or guaranteed self-help formula that will enable you to be smarter, faster, quicker, or even worse, have your kids learn things smarter, faster, quicker. And in my experience, all of those things are pretty empty. They're, the nature of human accomplishment is such that it's a coming together of vectors from so many places: family, environment, society, inner drive, fire, circumstance. I started playing guitar when I was 12 because the Beatles played guitar. If I had been born 10 years sooner, I would have been playing piano because Count Basie played piano. All of those things come together with so many simultaneous vectors pushing along that we don't, that to try and make them into a formula is delusive. There never will be a science of love or a science of storytelling or a science of siblings. There'll never be a science of storytelling for just the reason we were talking about with magic, because it always is changing and evolving, because the anticipation of your audience is always different. They've heard that one before. It's the most powerful human words you can have. I heard it already, so you got to tell another one. It's endlessly dynamic and changing. And that's what the humanities, my little corner of the humanities, the personal essay, are extremely good at. Delineating, drawing, suggesting, evoking all of the vectors, the human vectors that come together to make a particular moment. And in that sense, I think that the humanities can help you understand storytelling, poetry, songs, and essays can help you understand the nature of human accomplishment much more profoundly than social science can.
Well, you are a magician with words, Adam. Congratulations on this. Before we go, I want to introduce you to our sponsor and friend who we're going to be talking to in just a second, Rick Voight. Rick,
Hey, Rick.
Meet Adam Gopnik.
Hey, Rick, pleasure.
Very nice to meet you.
Pleasure. Where are you?
I am currently in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. I travel around quite a bit, and I was in Ohio for the Ohio Genealogical Society conference, and on my way back down to Charleston, South Carolina, where I live.
Oh my goodness, two things are true. One is I was just in Cleveland with presenting the book and had a wonderful evening. I've had such good times in Cleveland over the years that I once gave a talk at the Chagrin Valley Hunt Club, which is one of the starry events on my resume. And we just got our first invitation to Charleston in November for the literary festival. And my wife and I are going to go down. It's her birthday just then. So we're going to tell me what's the best restaurant in Charleston that I can take her for her birthday.
Unfortunately, I don't want to put myself out on that one, but the town, it actually used to have a CIA there, a culinary institute, and you will just find so many wonderful restaurants depending on what you're looking for.
It's a beautiful town with great food, so we're keenly looking forward to going down there for the first time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and who knows? Maybe if I'm in town at that time, maybe we can get together.
I tell you, you remind me of my friend Gail Sheehy, who was a dear friend of mine, and I now kind of want to be back in New York and have us all to dinner and just have a conversation. But we'll be spreading the word at our Venture Summit about your conference out here in California too. And this has been so inspiring. I just love the interview and I love what you're doing. And I hope all of the people that listen to this podcast will pick up and read both books, right? And keep up the amazing work.
The one you got to listen to. That's So Many Steves in print, the real work on the mystery of mastery. Get it. And while you're at it, that audio book is just terrific too. Kept me up at night. Adam, thank you so much for spending time with us on What's Next, Living Longer, Better, Smarter.
Fred, Mary, it was a pleasure, and let us live longer, better, and smarter too.
Fred, that was so exciting. You were right again. What a wonderful guest. Thank you, Adam, and congratulations once again.
Well, Mary, we'll be talking more about it, but we want to note that this week, the nation's Surgeon General, Dr. Vivid-Pix, issued a report on the epidemic of loneliness in the U.S. So important. And we've talked about it. This is also National Mental Health Awareness Month and National Photo Month. So we want to bring our friend Rick back on from Vivid-Pix. Rick, great to see you again. And these are areas that you've devoted so much to.
Well, Fred and Mary, thank you so much for having me on. And it's really the intersection of everything that we are working on. As you know, we did primary research a couple of years ago and it published last year on the benefits of photoreminiscence therapy. And with mental health, the ability for us to be able to relive memories, either with those with cognitive decline or just anyone, in order to bring forth wonderful memories. And that allows us to be able to connect, feel less lonely, and not feel the isolation that so many of us have felt over the last couple of years. So May is a very, very important month to us. And of course, being a photo guy for many, many decades, we've all taken so many photos. And now is the time that we should be reliving those and celebrating those.
Of course, one of my favorite photos is watching my horse come in at the races. And so it's Kentucky Derby this weekend. A lot of
Absolutely.
Louisville will be, and everyone wants to be in the picture when that horse comes in. So it's kind of exciting. We'll be addressing some of these issues, the issue of social connection, at our conference, the Longevity Venture Summit, coming up June 14th and 15th in Berkeley. And we have a competition on social connectedness. We're doing that with the ARP Age Tech Collaborative. So it's an incredible lineup of people.
Yeah, and Rick, tell us more about the way photos really bring family members and friends together. If we talk about this loneliness epidemic that's gotten the Surgeon General's attention, it really is. I mean, it's more than just looking at a photo and saying, "Hey, I remember that," and feeling close to people. They can bring us together in the present as well, right?
It's ironic that the meeting that I literally just walked out of was with a historical society, and the perspective of photos in our history, they explain where we came from, and from our history we understand where we are at, and by understanding where we are at, that can also propel us and compel us towards the future. So photographs is a prompt that allows us to reflect, reminisce on the past, but then it allows us to be able to project forward to say, I remember when I was doing X, and now I'm able to interact as, say, a father with a child when I was in a previous photograph of the child with the adult. And the photos allow us to be able to then hit that multi-generational level that make us equal and understanding and connecting with other people. And that's probably the greatest power of the photograph, is the interconnection between all of us.
Well, Mary had mentioned the Longevity Venture Summit coming up June 14th and 15th. That's in Berkeley, an incredible lineup there, as she said, but maryfurlong.com is the place to go for more info on that. And Rick, you are actually hosting classes and we'll have some giveaways throughout the month. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so during the month of May, which, as we discussed, is National Photo Month as well as National Mental Health Awareness Month, and the ability for us to be able to bring forth the stories is our number one goal at Vivid-Pix. So the first thing of that is to be able to scan all of our old photographs, mementos. So we're giving away one of our memory stations, and then the software, of course, to be able to restore those memories, make them look better, and bring back the color contrast, lightness, and sharpness. And then 3, the education to be able to bring those images out of the closet, to be able to interact with others in order to be able to help them tell their stories, and then also to tell your own story. And then we also include in the package on the research that we did in the classes we've created on reminiscence therapy for those with cognitive decline, i.e. dementia and Alzheimer's. So we're giving away an entire package to really tie together all the things that are so important to us in May, which is National Photo Month and National Mental Health Awareness Month.
And the place to go for more info, Rick?
Yep. Simply go to vividpix.com/giveaway. So Vivid, VIVID, dash or hyphen, Pix, P as in Paul, IX, /giveaway.
Thank you, Rick. And we also want to thank the wonderful Adam Gopnik for spending time with us. The book, again, is The Real Work on the Mystery of Mastery, and the brand new audio book is So Many Steves, Afternoons with Steve Martin. And of course, we thank all of you for watching or listening. You can always find us at maryfurlong.com/podcasts.